This is the English Suite podcast, the voice of Widener University English and Creative Writing, hosted by Jim Esch.
Hi, I'm Ciana Bowers. On today's episode of the English Suite, we celebrate Black History Month by sharing a virtual reading of selections from African American writers presented by Widener University students, faculty, and alumni.
This is Jim Esch. In the face of historical marginalization and exclusion of Black writers from the literary canon, the rich contributions of African American poets, writers, and dramatists to American literature cannot be denied. The voices of Black writers are at the very core of American literature. To quote from the department's statement on anti-racism, Widener English and Creative Writing believes in the power of the written word and the imagination to envision and build a world where all can thrive. We dedicate this episode to our fellow African American students and alumni. Black Lives Matter. You matter.
What is known today as Black History Month started in 1926 as Negro History Week, sponsored by the Association for the Study of African American Life and historian Carter G. Woodson. They selected the second week of February because it coincided with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. By the time of the Civil Rights era in the 1960s, Negro History Week had expanded into Black History Month, and President Jimmy Carter officially designated February as Black History Month in 1978. We hope you enjoy this celebration of African American literature and will continue to read and champion the work of Black writers.
This is Jim Esch, and I'd like to read a poem by Thalias Moss called Interpretation of a Poem by Frost. A young black girl stopped by the woods. So young she knew only one man, Jim Crow, but she wasn't allowed to call him Mister. The woods were his, and she respected his boundaries, even in the absence of fence. Of course she delighted in the filling up of his woods. She's so accustomed to emptiness, to being taken at face value. This face, her face eternally the brown of declining autumn, watches snow enter the grass, cling to bark, making it seem indecisive about race preference, a fast-to-melt idealism. With the grass covered, black and white are the only options. Polarity is the only reality. Corners aren't neutral, but are on edge. She shakes off snow, defiance wasted on the limited audience of horse. The snow does not hypnotize her as it wants to, as the blonde sun does in making too many prefer daylight. She has promises to keep. The promise that she bear Jim no bastards, the promise that she ride the horse only as long as it is willing to accept riders, the promise that she bear Jim no bastards, the promise to her face that it not be mistaken as shadow, and miles to go, more than the distance from Africa to Andover, more than the distance from black to white, before she sleeps with Jim.
Hello, my name is Rohan Suryagi. I'm an alumnus from the class of 2019, and it's a pleasure to be reading for the podcast today. I'll be reciting one of my favorite poems by Webb Du Bois, the renowned civil rights activist, Pan-Africanist, and also founder of race conflict theory, and this poem is called The Song of the Smoke. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am swinging in the sky. I am ringing worlds awry. I am the thought of the throbbing mills. I am the soul of the soul toil kills, wraith of the ripple of trading rills. Up I'm curling from the sod, I am whirling home to God. I am the Smoke King, I am black. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am wreathing broken hearts. I am sheathing love's light darts. Inspiration of iron times, wetting the toil of toiling climes, shedding the blood of bloodless crimes. Lurid lowering mid the blue, torrid towering toward the true. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am darkening with song. I am hearkening to wrong. I will be black as blackness can. The blacker the mantle, the mightier the man. For blackness was ancient ere whiteness began. I am daubing God and night. I am swabbing hell and white. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am the Smoke King. I am black. I am cursing ruddy morn. I am hearsing hearts unborn. Souls unto me are as stars in the night. I whiten my black men. I blacken my white. What's the hue of a hide to a man in his might? Hail, great, gritty, grimy hands. Sweet Christ, pity toiling lands. I am the Smoke King. I am black. Thank you.
Hello, Jayne Thompson here, and in honor of Black History Month, I'd like to share 2 poems. The first is called Belly Song. It is by the poet Ethridge Knight, and I use this poem in a lot of my classes. I teach it and take it with me to the prison when I go, juvenile detention centers, and I often use it as a branch off point to get people to start writing their own poetry. So the second poem that I'm going to share with you is called Blue Sea, and it was written by a man named Sadiq Palmer, who is currently incarcerated at SCI Phoenix outside of Philadelphia. He was in my very first class ever that I taught in a prison, and his poem is amazing, and it's based on Ethridge Knight's poem. Ethridge Knight was, didn't graduate from high school, but went instead into the Korean War. Unfortunately, he was very wounded and came back addicted to painkillers. His addiction to painkillers kind of rolled into needing money, and he robbed a store, was caught, and was sentenced to 8 years in prison in Indiana. And he wrote this poem after his release. Belly Song, or was published after his release. Belly Song, Ethridge Knight, for the Daytop family. You have made something out of the sea that blew and rolled you on its salt bitter lips. It nearly swallowed you, but I hear you are tough and harder to swallow than most. S. Mansfield. And here's the beginning of the poem. And I must admit that the sea in you has sung to the sea in me, and I must admit that the sea in me has fallen in love with the sea in you, because you have made something out of the sea that nearly swallowed you. And this poem, I give to you. This poem is a song I sing to you from the bottom of the sea in my belly. This poem is a song about feelings, about the bone of feeling, about the stone of feeling, and the feather of feeling. This poem is a death chant and a gravestone and a prayer for the dead, for young Jackie Robinson, a moving black warrior who walked among us with a side stride and heavy heels, moving through the blood and mud and shit of Vietnam, moving through the blood and mud and dope of America. For Jackie, who was a song and a stone and a feather of feeling, now dead and gone in this month of love. This poem is a silver feather and the sun god glinting, green hills breathing, river flowing, for Cheryl and David and their first kiss by the river, for Mark and Sue and a Sunday walk on her grandfather's farm, for Sammy and Marion, love rhythms, for Michael and Jean, love rhythms, love rhythms, and life. This poem, this poem, this poem, this poem is for me, And the days that lay in the back of my mind when the sea rose up to swallow me, and the streets I walked were lonely streets, were stone cold streets. This poem is for me, and the nights when I wrapped my feelings in a sheet of ice and stared at the stars through iron bars and cried in the middle of my eyes. This poem is for me and my woman, and the yesterdays when she opened to me like a flower, but I fell on her like a stone. And now, in my 40th year, I have come here to this house of feelings, to this singing sea, and I must admit that the sea in me has fallen in love with the sea in you, because the sea that now sings in you is the same sea that nearly swallowed you and me too. It's a beautiful poem. And here is Sadiq Palmer reading his poem entitled Blue Sea that he wrote for his son. And he wrote it in response to Ethridge Knight's Belly Song. And you can hear the references to Belly Song throughout. You'll notice in this recording, there's a lot of background noise. I should tell you that he read this poem into a small recorder that the prison allowed me to take into there to make a recording. And it was the very first day they held the publication of the anthology in which this poem can be found. It was an amazing day for me, and I imagine it was an amazing day for them as well.
Page 155, a poem in response to Ethridge Knight Belly Song. D. Sadiq P. Deep Blue Sea. What's up, son? I see you, but you don't see me. Damn, my bad. This ain't about me seeing you or you seeing me. I'm not talking about the sea that separates a piece of land from another. This is about the sea of deep misery that has us locked up, boxed up like the cargo in boats that floats over the seas to lands that seems like make-believe to me, you see. I can't be with you to hold you and mold you like a captain and his first mate. But at any rate, I can try to guide and steer you from falling into the sea of never-ending abyss. No fish, no coral, no islands, but plenty of salt that comes from the water that leaks from the eyes of those who secretly shed tears out of fear of never escaping the abyss. The abyss, I say it again, because it's not your friend. This water, not blue or green, that seems to come to life when you enter like movie screens, with beautiful colors that shake and shimmer as the sun illuminates every glimmer. Nah, son, this is the Black Sea, the deep dark place where you don't want to be, where everyone looks and feels like me, full of pain and despair, in the sea of stale air. Take heed to my words, or this will be a destiny, because the road you're heading down has already got the best of me. So I hope you see what I didn't see and follow the blue sea and not the Black Sea that has swallowed me.
My name is Emma Irving. I graduated with the class of 2018, and I'm very thrilled to be on the English Suite podcast for this Black History Month feature on Toni Morrison's birthday, nonetheless. So I have prepared a few different pieces here to share with you. So the first one comes from this book by Terence Hayes entitled American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. Terence Hayes, I saw at AWP in 2017, just weeks after the inauguration in DC. So things were very tense, very intense AWP. But I went to a reading with Terence Hayes, Rita Dove, and Ocean Vuong. So like just a big, this big hitter list that we got to see, and I was just starstruck. But Terence Hayes wrote these poems, and the back of the book will tell you they were written during the first 200 days of the Trump presidency. So he read drafts of these at AWP, very, very early drafts of these sonnets. And this was really the first time in my life where I heard a real live writer sharing work that was in progress. And I thought, how amazing that you can do that. And I guess I had realized that was possible before, but not really to this extent. So, and then this book was published in 2018. So American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin, there's 70 sonnets all by the same name. And when you look at them, they generally look like sonnets. They're 14 lines, but they take a lot of other liberties with the form. But it's a lot about not only the political state of the country, but about love and writing. So I'm going to read you the first piece from this collection. So this is the first American sonnet for my past and future assassin. The Black poet would love to say his century began with Hughes or, God forbid, Wheatley, but actually it began with all the poetry weirdos and worriers, warriors, poetry whiners and winos falling from ship bows, sunset bridges and windows. In a second, I'll tell you how little writing rescues. My hunch is that Sylvia Plath was not especially fun company. A drama queen, thin-skinned and skittery, she thought her poems were ordinary. What do you call a visionary who does not recognize her vision? Orpheus was alone when he invented writing. His manic drawing became a kind of writing when he sent his beloved a sketch of an eye with an X struck through it. He meant, I am blind without you. She thought he meant, I never want to see you again. It is possible he meant that too. The second one I want to share, I was thinking about Terence Hayes and kind of looking him up a little bit, and realized that he was the creator of this new sort of poetic form called a golden shovel, which is where you take a line from a poem that you admire, and then you use each word in the line as an end word in your poem, keeping it in order. So Terence Hayes made this poem, The Golden Shovel, from a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks entitled We Real Cool. And I thought that was a very, very cool thing to do. And it was just this year also that I found, so the poem I'm about to read for you, A Song in the Front Yard by Gwendolyn Brooks. A piece of this poem has hung in my parents' kitchen since I was in second grade, which is when my elementary school principal, Mr. Poppy, was retiring. And we had this project where we had to pick little segments of poems and then write him a little note about why we chose it and wish him well on his way. And I chose the first stanza of this Gwendolyn Brooks poem, and I never knew the rest of the poem until like a few months ago. But I think it's wonderful and gets at this sort of spot between curiosity and danger that women, Black women especially, face in the world, but I think it's really brave and strong as well. So this is A Song in the Front Yard by Gwendolyn Brooks. I've stayed in the front yard all my life. I want to peek at the back where it's rough and untended and hungry weed grows. A girl gets sick of a rose. I want to go in the backyard now, and maybe down the alley to where the charity children play. I want a good time today. They do some wonderful things. They have some wonderful fun. My mother sneers, but I say it's fine, how they don't have to go in at 8:45. My mother, she tells me that Johnny May will grow up to be a bad woman, that George will be taken to jail soon or late. On account of last winter, he sold our back gate. But I say it's fine, honest, I do. And I'd like to be a bad woman too, and wear the brave stockings of night black lace and strut down the streets with paint on my face. Yes, so then the last reading I prepared is from one of my favorite novels of last year. It is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Came out in 2020. So this Brandon Taylor is one of those underachievers who has a graduate degree in biochemistry and was an Iowa Arts Fellow at the Iowa Writers Workshop in Fiction. So he comes from these very disparate sort of backgrounds. And I read an interview with him that said he wrote this book in like 5 weeks, just had to get it out there, which is insane. But it's a campus novel. It's about these graduate students at this unnamed Midwestern university working on their biochem program. And Wallace is the main character. He's a queer Black man from Alabama who has ended up in this Midwestern town to work on this degree. And the story takes place over one weekend. It starts a Friday night and ends Monday morning. And I'm really fascinated by stories that deal with time compression like this one does, where, a lot of normal stuff happens. He, goes out for drinks with his friends and they're eating jalapeno poppers, and his one friend accidentally rubs his eye and gets jalapeno in his eyeball and has to go flush it out in the bathroom. Like, there's just normal stuff that happens. But in the middle, there's this very short section. It's one paragraph. It's like 10 pages where Wallace opens up about his past in Alabama. And there's a lot going on here. It's a lot of psychology, but I thought the poetry was really shocking when I read this. So this is from this is page 195 through 196 of Real Life by Brandon Taylor. It stormed all the time. Thunder and lightning and wind so hard it shook the trees and sometimes twisted them clean out of the dirt. There was so much rain one summer that we couldn't keep anything in the ground, and there were strange patches of tomatoes and cabbage growing in the briars because the seeds had been swept across the sand by the rain. That's what comes to me first, the scent of the damp earth, the heat clinging close to the ground, and the gray mist rising after a heavy storm. The clouds were purple, black, and gray, softening when the weather broke, and you could tell which way the storm had come from because the trees were still split wide, and there was a path through the woods as if some huge animal had come slinking through them. And on the hill, looking down into the ravine, all that water on the leaves glinted like little stars, little trapped earthbound galaxies flaring into life. Soon the ants came, and they latched on to whatever had drowned in the rain, and they took it off piece by piece. Once there was a rat that had been drowned near the corner of the house, its white and gray fur all matted, and the ants were thronging in and out of its mouth like air, like breath made of small, dark bodies. Another time, there were birds that had been thrown from their nests, skin translucent and blue like fresh ice from a vending machine, their pink mouths flung wide. Delicate little clothes of skin and feather, bones so light that in another life they might have floated away into the sky, riding on currents of warm air, but now splashed in mud and being disassembled by ants, so many of them that they too were a skin, writhing and dark beneath the shadow of the bushes, almost obscured except at the moment of passing when the eye drops down and sees them, and in the body a startled, horrifying jolt that something there is dying and dead already. That's how it was with storms, coming on suddenly and then vanishing, leaving behind dead things wreathed in dark ants and in mist coming out of the trees like ghosts. And that's from Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Really great book. I really love it. It's one of those books where like nothing happens. The characters have like the same conversations and they just do normal things, but it's like deep in psychology, and there's a lot of sexual abuse in the past, and there's aggressions, micro and otherwise, that Wallace faces in his lab program, a lot of relationships. I really enjoyed this book, so highly recommend.
I'm Shpresa Ymeraj, and I'll be reading a fragment from Jazz by Toni Morrison. Pain. I seem to have an affection, a kind of sweet tooth for it. Bolts of lightning, little rivulets of thunder, and I, the eye of the storm, mourning the split trees, hens starving on rooftops, figuring out what can be done to save them since they cannot save themselves because of me. Well, it's my storm, isn't it? I break lives to prove I can mend them back together. And although the pain is theirs, I share it, don't I? Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way. But it is another way. I'm uneasy now, feeling a bit false. What, I wonder, what would I be without a few brilliant spots of blood to ponder, without aching words that set, then miss the mark? I ought to get out of this place, avoid the window, leave the hole I cut through the door to get in lives instead of having one of my own. It was loving the city that distracted me and gave me ideas, made me think I could speak its loud voice and make that sound human. I missed the people altogether. I thought I knew them and wasn't worried that they didn't really know about me. Now it's clear why they contradicted me at every turn. They knew me all along. Out of the corners of their eyes, they watched me. And when I was feeling most invisible, being tip-lipped, silent and unobservable, they were whispering about me to each other. They knew how little I could be counted on, how poorly, how shabbily my well-know-it-all self covered helplessness. Then when I invented stories about them, and doing it seemed to me so fine, I was completely in their hands, managed without mercy. I thought I'd hidden myself so well as I watched them through windows and doors, took every opportunity I had to follow them, to gossip about and fill in their lives, and all the while they were watching me. Sometimes they even felt sorry for me, and just thinking about their pity, I want to die. So I missed it altogether. I was sure one would kill the other. I waited for it so I could describe it. I was so sure it would happen, that the past was an abused record with no choice but to repeat itself at the crack, and no power on earth could lift the arm that held the needle. I was so sure, and they danced and walked all over me. Busy they were, busy being original, complicated, unchangeable human. I guess you'd say while I was the predictable one, confused in my solitude into arrogance, thinking my space, my view, the only one that was or that mattered. I got so aroused while meddling, while finger shaping, I overreached and missed the obvious. I was watching the streets thrilled by the buildings pressing and pressed by stone, so glad to be looking out and in on things I dismissed what went on in hard pockets close to me. I saw the three of them, Phyllis, Joe, and Violet, and they looked to me like a mirror image of Dorcas, Joe, and Violet. I believed I saw everything important they did, and based on what I could imagine, what I did and how exotic they were, how driven like dangerous children. That's what I wanted to believe. It never occurred to me that they were thinking other thoughts, feeling other feelings, putting their lives together in ways I never dreamt of, like Joe. To this moment, I'm not sure what his tears were really for, but I do know they were for more than Dorcas. All the while he was running through the streets in bad weather, I thought he was looking for her, not Wilde's chamber of gold. That home in the rock, that place sunlight got into most of the day, nothing to be proud of or show anybody or want to be in, but I do. I want to be in a place already made for me, both snug and wide open, with a doorway never needing to be closed, a view slanted for light and bright autumn leaves, but not rain, where moonlight can be counted on if the sky is clear and stars no matter what. And below, just yonder river called Trizon, to rely on. I'd love to close myself in the place left by the woman who lived there and scared everybody, unseen because she knows better than to be seen. After all, who would see her, a playful woman who lived in a rock, who could, without fright of her looking eyes, looking back? I wouldn't mind. Why should I? She has seen me and is not afraid of me. She hugs me, understands me, has given me her hand. I am touched by her, released in secret. Now I know.
Duty by Natasha Trethewey. When he tells the story, now he's at the center of it. Everyone else in the house falling into the backdrop. My mother, grandmother, and uncle all dead now. Props in our own story. Father and daughter caught in memory's half-light. I'm too young to recall it, so his story becomes the story. 1969, Hurricane Camille bearing down, the old house shuddering as if it will collapse. Rain pours into every room, and he has to keep moving, keep me out of harm's way. A father's first duty, to protect. And so, in the story, he does. I am small in his arms, perhaps even sleeping. Water is rising around us, and there is no higher place he can take me than this, memory forged in the storm's eye. A girl clinging to her father. What can I do but this? Let him tell it again and again as if it's always been only us, and that, when it mattered, he was the one who saved me. I love this poem because Natasha is acknowledging the fact that how she sees her father and how her father sees himself are not congruent or close to the same, but despite that, she takes a step back and lets him be the man that he wanted to be and the man that he could have been maybe for her, and gives him the ownership of this memory.
Hi, I'm Mark Graybill. This poem was written by Michael S. Harper, a longtime professor at Brown University, who died in 2016. The New York Times obituary on Harper described his verse as, quote, elusive and jazz-inflected, and highlighted the way it, quote, interwove his personal experiences as a black man with an expansive view of history. Baseball was a part of that history to which he returned frequently. Until Jackie Robinson broke the Major League color barrier in 1947, of course, black players were restricted to the Negro Leagues. This poem, titled Archives, references numerous Negro League legends, such as league founder Rube Foster, catcher Josh Gibson, who was, by some accounts, the greatest hitter of all time, black or white, and the ageless pitcher Satchel Paige. Inspired by a trip to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, which incidentally only recently decided to classify Negro League player statistics as part of the Major League Record Book, Harper uncovers some of the forgotten figures and events of black professional baseball, including the powerhouse 1937 team assembled by the Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo, which was composed of many Negro League stars, and which provided for most of them the only opportunity to play on an integrated team they would ever have. The poem ends evocatively with the famous mantra of Chicago Cubs shortstop Ernie Banks. Archives, Cooperstown, New York. Photos and clippings fade. No one can find a real signature of Rube Foster, who put together the Negro Leagues. Efforts at why Josh Gibson died at 35 are even vaguer. His sleek, strong body in the waves of San Juan, the vintage year, 1934. Later, 72 home runs, the only ball over the third tier of Yankee Stadium for the games on off days. No flicks of Gibson as a globetrotter, his golden gloves astride the mound captured, for real, with Curt Flood, eating steaks on a grill in a parking lot in spring training. Reggie is a mask, astride a roadster, a paltry lid on a rain day with Vita Blue. Frank Robinson's loaded automatic put him under arrest. The flick of his head rag, a white mop, only shown in Cincinnati, eating Satchel's 45-pound catfish, chasing Wilmont Liquors, Inc., as endorsements in Brooklyn. The clippings of the rest of Negro America are full of glee, no ounce of bitterness, except for Jackie, who hit better than they thought, and was fast, stealing home in public, voting Republican, the whole Civil War on his back and pigeon toes. On PBS, the documentaries, one trailer sideshow, a whole haul of oral history and transcriptions of black and white. Trujillo, who paid the best, threatened execution if you lost. The Black World Series in Comiskey, full of chicken, zoot suits, train fare from everywhere, but endorsements, turnstiles. Let's play 2.
Hello, my name is Josh Schneider. I am a 2017 alum of Widener University. I got my degree in English there, met a ton of wonderful professors who exposed me to a ton of wonderful books, authors, and all that good stuff. I'm happy to have the opportunity to share what I think is a very impactful poem. So thank you very much for having me, Professor Esch, and I'll get right into it. I will be reading a poem called Grief Sestina. It is by a Chicago poet named Dante Collins. They are a black queer poet, self-described radical blues poet. Dante Collins was the 2016 winner of the Most Promising Young Poet Award from the Academy of American Poets. So here's Grief Sestina. You've heard grief turns the body to stone. Like some brash and greedy lover, the earth curls its frigid limbs round your mother's body. Death is the only possible thing she would put before her children's needs, and you need so badly for winter to release its grip. Reverse each winter flake resting too boldly on her tombstone. An absence so thick, her 11 children begin to erase. Begin to envy the earth for its ability to hunger, to call anything. Food. This is the first funeral your mother will not sing you through. Grief mothers your tuneless bones. January holds winter like a sobbing brother, while everything reminds you of what final seed or stone your body will become to fertilize the earth. Who are you now, if not your mother's child? Orphan means you are everything's child, or orphan means the land is your mother, or orphan means you belong to the earth. Even when, like a groggy, silent god, winter comes to sharpen every song to stone. You've heard death is natural, then everything, come spring, must grieve. To thaw is a thing of release, of new, wet life beckoning a child's hands. Look at how mud can clean any stone in the garden. Carefully make out your mother's face among the good soil. Yes, Dante, winter will leave and will come again, and from the earth will grow her smile flagging in April's earthly wind. A bulb, a stem, a stalk braving anything, threatening sunlight. Yes, Dante, winter will leave and will take her body with. Children, stand and sing. Sometimes I feel like a motherless, and the church joins, motherless child. Stone tongues singing to stone. Sometimes I feel earth becoming motherless. You are everything's sweet child, singing in hopes to melt winter. This comes from their collection Autopsy, which came out in 2017. I'd highly recommend getting a copy. You can find it on Button Poetry. This poem really resonates with me specifically because it is dealing with grief. I think a sestina is the perfect way to tackle this subject because there's a lot of repetition of keywords to sort of make the very specific type of grief you're feeling stick. It's definitely a hard format, but I think Dante mastered it here. I lost my little brother when I was very young, and a lot of these lines definitely resonate with me, particularly at the beginning here. Death is the only possible thing she would put before her children's needs. And that reminds me so much of how loving and full of my life my little brother was. And so this poem has helped me a lot to sort of accept what's happened, or at least the very best, live alongside it. and know that there are other people living alongside those same feelings.
Hi, my name is Christina Giska, and I will be reading a poem by Jericho Brown from his book, The Tradition. Ganymede by Jericho Brown. A man trades his son for horses. That's the version I prefer. I liked the safety of it. No one at fault, everyone rewarded. God gets the boy becomes immortal. His father rides until grief sounds as good as the gallop of an animal born to carry those who patrol our inherited kingdom. When we look at myth this way, no one bothers saying rape. I mean, don't you want God to want you? Don't you dream of someone with wings taking you up? And when the master comes for our children, he smells like the men who own stables in heaven, that far train between promise and apology. No one has to convince us. The people of my country believe we can't be hurt if we can be bought.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Pobo, and I am retired from Widener. I taught for 33 years at Widener in English and creative writing. The writer I've chosen is Lucille Clifton. She was born in 1936. She died in 2010. She wrote a poem that's meant a lot to me because it celebrates so much about the body, freedom, being free in yourself, and particularly, I think this is a celebration of African-American and woman's body as well. And this poem is called Homage to My Hips. These hips are big hips. They need space to move around in. They don't fit into little petty places. These hips are free hips. They don't like to be held back. These hips have never been enslaved. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. These hips are magic hips. I have known them to put a spell on a man and spin him like a top. Now, as far as being a poem of celebration, makes you feel great to have a body, doesn't it? Even as they get older and break down, but still that kind of sense of celebration. But there's the one word I didn't use that I should use actually when I read that poem is power. There's power in the body. There's power in the self that's connected to the body. And she is able to bring that to us, I think, also with humor. That ending, which I've always loved, spin the guy like a top. Who's got the power in that relation? It's her, So I find that poem to be particularly enlivening.
For this reading, I've chosen an excerpt from The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, which is an essay by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde was a Black American poet, writer, feminist, and civil rights activist. In her essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, Lorde writes, quote, "What does it mean when the tools of a racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of that same patriarchy? It means that only the most narrow parameters of change are possible and allowable," unquote. And in this essay, many aspects of prejudice are discussed, including this quote outlining the reality of straight white men being unable to and or unwilling to acknowledge the immense part they have played for thousands of years in forming a racist and hateful society. And looking down from this high tower of privilege that all white people share, it's impossible to understand how others live without asking, immersing yourself into the research, and above all, being willing to improve yourself and to limit assumptions. This reminds me of a quote one of my high school teachers said about religion, which is, "To know one religion is to know none at all." Being complacent in a place of privilege and not bothering to acknowledge how incredibly arduous life is for others without that same luxury is only adding to the problem. I feel that one must first break down the stereotypes that have been forming in their head for years and truly welcome a better option into their life, which is learning, being open to understanding how your assumptions were wrong and continuously correcting yourself. Be open to differences, but praise them instead of remaining fearful. Thank you for listening.
I'd like to read a poem by Robert Hayden called Frederick Douglass. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct, brain matter, diastole, systole, reflex action, when it is finally one, when it is more than the gaudy mumbo-jumbo of politicians, this man, this Douglass, this former slave, this Negro beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, alien, this man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered. Oh, not with statues rhetoric, not with legends and poems and wreaths of bronze alone, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing. I want to thank all our contributors to today's show. Couldn't have done it without you. Rohan Suriyage, Jayne Thompson, Emma Irving, Shpresa Ymeraj, Kim Roberts, Mark Graybill, Josh Schneider, Christina Giska, Ken Pobo, and Gabby Norris. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the English Suite. If you would like to give feedback or get more information about the writers presented in today's episode, email us at widenerenglishsuite@gmail.com. You can subscribe to our podcast at anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcasting applications. The English Suite is produced by Jim Esch with assistance from Ciana Bowers, Chloe D. Flamery, Christina Giska, Matt Lomas, and Shpresa Ymeraj.